Anthropological Airwaves is the official podcast of the journal American Anthropologist, whose main offices are located on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Nacotchunk, Anacostia, and Piscataway peoples. The Anacostia and Potomac rivers have long been places of trade and gathering for Indigenous peoples, and Washington, D.C. is now home to diverse Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. American Anthropologist has published material throughout its history that has taken knowledge from Indigenous peoples for a scholarly audience and has not required its authors or editors to be good relations to Indigenous peoples and communities. Acknowledging territory is only one step in repairing these relationships. The editorial collective of the journal is committed to deep listening and engagement with Indigenous scholars, peoples, and communities to explore ways to be a better relation. Today's recording is the third of a three-part episode that was produced on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. This piece of the series was recorded, edited, and produced on the occupied ancestral lands of the Narragansett in what is now called Providence, Rhode Island. As its original inhabitants, the Narragansett people have stewarded this land since time immemorial and continue to do so today. Parts of this episode, including this recording, were produced from the traditional territories of the Catawba, Waxhaw, Chera, and Sugaree peoples. While many descendants of the Chera, Waxhaw, and Sugaree communities eventually joined the Catawba peoples, the Catawba Nation continues to thrive in what is now called Rock Hill, South Carolina. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Anthropological Airwaves, the official podcast of the journal American Anthropologist. This is Season 4, Episode 1, Part 3. My name is Anar Parikh. I'm a PhD candidate in anthropology at Brown University. Some of you may already recognize me and my voice, but in case we haven't had the chance to be acquainted yet, I'm the associate editor of the podcast at American Anthropologist and the executive producer of this show. I use she, her pronouns. Today, on Anthropological Airwaves, we're bringing you the final installment of I'm Indigenous, Not Mestizo, the art and activism of rapper Jaguar Arreola, a three-part series produced by Adelaida Tamayo and Benjamin Salinas, PhD students in the Department of Anthropology at Brown University. Originally submitted as a collaborative, multimodal final project for a graduate seminar on violence, governance, and transnationalism, we're bringing you their work in podcast form, with some minor modifications. In Part 1, they prepared for their interview with Jaguar, an Indigenous Chicano musician based in Los Angeles, California. Part 2 features the interview with Jaguar. And in Part 3, the debrief, Adelaida and Ben reflect on the conversation and on the project as a whole. If you're just tuning in now, I'll briefly explain how this series works before passing the mic on to Adelaida and Ben. Parts 1 and 2, which dropped earlier this week, are available for listening. Today's episode is Part 3, and the final installment in this series. If you've been listening to each segment of this as it airs, I hope you've enjoyed following Adelaida and Ben through the process of creating this project. If you're tuning in from the future, feel free to listen to episodes in order, or hop around based on what suits your listening interests.
I guess I'll start with the first thing that's on my mind, which is I really appreciated his, it's something that you don't get a lot in, social media discourse on activism, which is also, this, we're fighting, but also, we take breaks, and we're chilling, and we make time for ourselves, and, for caring for ourselves, and, I thought that was a really kind of nice part that he was talking about, that, because I just when you only see the post on Instagram or on social media, it's just it makes you feel like you have to be doing this kind of fighting all the time.
It's all or nothing.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. And I think, it's so weird how, especially with COVID, so much of our encounters with other movements have been through social media. And it's like it's just a glimpse, right? And it's just like one idea. And often it's performative, which like has its own kinds of issues. But there's something about like this feeling of inspiration I have right now just from having an in-depth conversation. And I think that's part of the gift of anthropology, right? Like that is actually like we love to like hate on our discipline, but actually like there's something cool about that in-depth conversation, right? And it was really interesting, I thought, the way he answered the "what can we do" question. When we were writing that question about what can academia do, we were thinking kind of theoretically. I think like what is the role of academia in this struggle? And I think that we were thinking theoretically, like we need different discourse about activism or something. And his answer was so concrete. He was like, redistribute the wealth, donate to organizations, start a club at your university. It was all actionable. And that was just, it sounds so obvious, but I think we forget about the simple stuff, you know? Like,
especially with like, you know, a big part of this project was like kind of reformulating what kinds of knowledge we are able to present, which is like, that's how I was thinking about it. It's like, okay, like how can we reconsider what it means to be knowledgeable and like all these things, which is like obviously something he's concerned with, but like that whole like just like use the space and the resources you are given to just, you know, move them around, like move them to other people. I agree, that was like striking.
Because it's, and on the one hand it's so obvious, and on the other hand I feel like it's in the fringes of the academy, and maybe it makes sense because it is a little bit radical, but redistributing the wealth is not something that's like necessary to be an anthropologist, right? It's something that occasionally people decide to sort of kind of do, right? Like And one thing I've been thinking about also is like the awkwardness of giving money away. I think it's something, I think this is more of just a personal battle, something I have to just get over. But it is something to consider in terms of anthropology methods, you know, and maybe it's something that needs to be kind of like standardized more or like discussed more in a methods class, right? Because, I mean, I don't know if that would be better or worse to institutionalize it, but like, I feel like giving money away tends to be kind of a rogue decision. And we don't always know exactly how to do it, you know, like even now when we decided, like we were like, we for sure should pay him, but then I was like, wait, how much? I don't even know.
Should we ask him first?
So
no, it's interesting. I think it's a very like United Statesian thing. Like, and maybe I don't know, this is a very small part of it, but like the idea of, you know, like handouts, the government handouts to whatever, like that discourse has been like especially in the past like 5 years. And like I wonder to what degree like I personally have like in kind of like, even though I'm like completely disagree, like in my head I'm gonna disagree with that, how much I've like interpreted some level of like, okay, maybe I shouldn't just give other people stuff because also I don't want to like patronize people, right?
That's my big thing.
I don't want to be like, oh, you can't do anything. But then at the same time, like, you know, here I am just like making money off of just writing books.
And it also goes both ways. I mean, on the other hand, I don't think it doesn't have to, you know, just how he said, like, self-care is important too, you know, like taking a break, like taking care of yourself is important too, you know. I think there is also a balance to be had, which is part of what he was saying.
I was gonna say, that reminds me of what he was talking about, like when he was like, you know, when I go to the club, I'm not gonna be like listening to something with like revolutionary potential. Right? I'm just like, I'm listening for a vibe, is what he said. And I was like, that's like kind of analogous, right? Like, not every little action needs to be like filled to the brim with revolutionary action, right? And I think there's also something important about like relatively happy and healthy and like fulfilled people doing work like that's gonna be more effective than like people who are just trying to like forced to fight every day.
Totally. Like a lifetime of fulfilled work is better than like 1 week of like hard work and then a lifetime of burnout. You know, or even like 4 years of hard work and then a lifetime of burnout, you know? And so totally, yeah. Another thing that stood out to me was the really intentional choices of language that he had. And it was inspiring to me in terms of how I might want to think about my language more in class settings and just in general. Because I think there's a lot to be said for just walking the walk silently, you know, like humble, you know, he was really humble about his like magnificent political ideas, you know? Like there wasn't really much preaching, but it was small moments where he used the term Turtle Island, you know, he uses the word my relatives, you know, like my houseless relatives.
Me a lot.
Yeah,
houseless instead of homeless. Abya Yala, that was the other one I was thinking of. And like, it was interesting how he like the so-called America, right? That was the one he like explained the most, right? But it wasn't even like, you're right. I hadn't thought about this, but it wasn't like preachy. It was like him, like, these are my choices. These are my language choices. Let me tell you why I'm making them, and maybe you'll like be inspired by them or something. And I feel like that kind of way of telling you a story is also very inspiring. And it's a niche world, but it made me think like that's a really good approach to sharing ideas in class, you know? Like I think sometimes we end up getting combative. Not that anyone actually gets really combative, but like sometimes you get really frustrated when you disagree with someone and you're like, well, like you're just not thinking about this, but like there's something to be said about just like being clear with your own ideas and just holding them dear. And pridefully. That was a cool interview, and it just, like I said during the interview, it totally justified everything I've ever written about mixed methods. Like this was like reading 10 amazing papers plus a good vibe, you know? That whole like I love that he said, like, you know, I can't put it on paper and put it into theory, but like I don't need to, right? And then he talked about Neo-Rome, and now I was like, whoa, that's so cool. And I could totally see that being like an academic paper, right? Like America is Neo-Rome, right? Blah, 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 you know, in the 60s, you know, some fancy academic title, right? But like he does the same like theoretical and like historical labor in like, you know, like half the amount of like not nearly the amount of time, and like in an engaged and dialogued way. And we captured that experience of like him coming to that, him coming to the realization that he wants to tell us that, and then us like reacting to it. I feel like which is something that you can't get, and it's like just, you know, now we're gonna write a story about how we did an interview.
And that instant dialogue, right? Like it's it's something cool about that interview. Cool. With these dialogues and the interview done, we went to work editing the video and this podcast. Afterwards, we decided to include a final debrief about the editing decisions we made, along with some final thoughts on the project.
So we're almost done with this project, and you know, we've just finished the editing, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the choices you made while editing the video.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think it was interesting that while I was editing the video, because Jaguar would take our questions and just run with them and talk for so long with each question, I ended up mostly cutting out pieces of his dialogue that didn't quite feel relevant. That was a surprise to me. I thought I would be cutting out us talking, but I ended up cutting out his talking more so. I also ended up cutting out kind of our logistical discussions and false starts, any other kind of awkward moments. What about you? What were you cutting out and cutting in?
Yeah, so one thing I didn't really expect was that I was going to have so many, you know, insecurities or questions about my own voice and my own thoughts when I was recording. You know, we were just having conversations and dialogue. These weren't planned conversations with a pre-scripted narrative. So all of my thoughts were just kind of coming as I was talking, which I think is important to capture, right? That it's part of how anthropology works. In fact, it's how our projects work. We're just constantly in dialogue with our interlocutors and with other scholars, and then we finally get to put it into writing and cut out all of the awkwardness. But when I was assembling the podcast from all of our recordings, that wasn't really an option. Like there were a few times where we went back and like re-recorded something or added a voiceover or two to try to get a transition. But a lot of it was just trying to find ways to make our somewhat disjointed thoughts into a coherent narrative.
Yeah, totally. And I think that brings me to kind of another element of the video making process that I've been thinking about is how, I mean, like in an ideal world, I would have loved to fill the video with a bunch of fun elements, with a bunch of other music videos, with a bunch, like even graphics. I could have done animation. Like I had all these ideas, but the reality of the video making process is just, it took me so long to edit that I just, you know, like we ended up doing a very simple edit with just a few moments where I put in some music videos or just images that he uses in his work. But it was really interesting and kind of exciting to see how different images can play along with the words. So that was exciting. Definitely something I would want to do more of in the future, but also kind of a learning experience for me. That first off, editing is hard and it takes a while, but also like there is, you know, there's a specific skill set that we're working on. And editing is a skill set, just like writing is a skill set that we have to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt the same way about the podcast. Just I went and watched a few videos after I started editing about how to make a podcast, and they told us to record on certain types of microphones and in certain types of environments, and these were just not things we even took into account when we started making the project, and so we had to calibrate and figure it out as we were going along, which was exciting and interesting and like a good learning process. But it definitely showed me that it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. It's not as simple and as cut forward as I thought it was going to be. Yeah, but I feel like it was an awesome learning experience, and it was just, at the end of the day, I mean, it was really cool to get such good practice editing and kind of practice doing an ethnography with a real interview. You know, I think there was something really cool about having a real interview with this dope activist who's so excited and passionate about his work that made us be able to really commit to making a good edit and really commit to try to get our skill sets to the level, even if this is just like a first attempt at visual anthropology. It's a cool way to figure out exactly what we need to learn and what the next steps are to become kind of fully formed multimodal anthropologists, right? Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And for me, this just kind of like confirmed that this is the direction we want to go. I just think it's so exciting that we like you said, he's such an energetic, and like his person and his activist spirit is just like contagious, and I just love that we were able to like capture that and not have to transform it into a text or into some kind of written work where his face, his facial expressions, his intonation, all of that gets lost in a text. So yeah, no, this was a really exciting project. Thank you for doing it with me. Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Anthropological Airwaves. We'll be back in your ears next month with more great anthro audio. This episode was edited and produced by Adelaida Tamayo and Benjamin Salinas. Anar Parikh is the executive producer of Anthropological Airwaves and the associate editor of the podcast at American Anthropologist. This episode features music by Benjamin Salinas. The intro and outro music you hear is titled Waiting by Croander. As always, A closed caption version of this and every episode of Anthropological Airwaves is available on our YouTube channel, and a full transcription on the episode page on the American Anthropologist website. Links to both are included in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to Anthropological Airwaves wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to rate and review us while you're there. A 5-star review in particular will help other listeners find the show. We would also love to hear from you in general. If you have feedback, recommendations, or thoughts on recent episodes, send an email to amanthpodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on our Facebook page or on Twitter with the handle @AnthroAirwaves. Find links to all of our contact information in the show notes or on the Anthropological Airwaves section of the American Anthropologist website. See you later!